streets.
Ask the streets. Ask the streets.
I like that one.
That's not true. Your politics is in everything you do, whether you're getting the benefit over in your neighborhood from the economic structure, whether enough votes are cast to lower the taxes in your neighborhood. We all are engaged in a political process. The reason why we are so economically behind is because we have dispositions to say, I'm not into politics. Politics is into you. Politics is all the way into you, you know, and so...
Family, welcome to another edition of Ask the Streets Media. We're in the building. I got Mr. Robert ORR and Pastor Perry, and today we're going to talk to y'all about a trip that they took to Africa. And I guess I'll dive right into it. You know, most people I know that call themselves black people, I say black people that travel out the country, Africa not really on that list. So like what motivated this?
Okay, I'll start. What's up, everybody? What motivated this trip was, actually this is my 7th trip to the continent. I think one thing that I want to say about this idea of going to Africa is to break that down a little bit. A lot of times people say, are you going to Africa? And they think of Africa as one unit, one monolithic, I go to Africa, you know, but you have to realize that Africa is made up of over 40 countries. And so, you know, it's not enough to say you're going to Africa. We went to Kenya. Went to Nairobi, Kenya. And that is very, very specific, because if you're talking about going to Kenya versus South Africa versus Libya versus West Africa, you know, that's completely different flows. You know,
different cultures,
completely different cultures. All 4 of those are like the 4 corners.
Now, when you say that, could you give me a little explanation of what you mean by different cultures? Because from over here, I wouldn't imagine that they'd be too different. But
oh man,
I do understand how even in the States you got different cultures between the different states. So
yeah.
Like how dramatically different are these cultures?
Dramatically different. Yeah, you talk about, for instance, if you go like Northern Africa. A lot of those people in the northern part of Africa don't even consider themselves African.
Oh wow!
You know, and so
well, they move Egypt out of Africa, right?
Well, I guess what I'm talking about, they a lot of those, and I'm trying to think of the specific countries, but they identify more with the Arab countries than they do than the African countries. So that's very different. Then you look at the flow in South Africa, where you dominated by Afrikaans because of apartheid and things like that. That's a completely different flow than what you have in Kenya. Then even how black people are viewed in different parts is very different. People in East Africa, West Africa, Ghana are going to relate a whole lot more closely to African Americans than people in East Africa or in South Africa. I know I was in South Africa and I had people upset with me because I called myself an African American.
Wow.
They said, you're not African, so how you call yourself an African American? Whereas the people in West Africa, say Ghana, where a lot of the slaves came from, that was the point of exit.
Right.
They look at us and they go, man, you home. You know, and so it's a different feel.
2 questions on what you just said. You use the term Afrikaan. I'm not really familiar with that term. If you can explain that. And then secondly, you mentioned that what do they call you then if they don't call you African American?
You're American.
They just call you
just an American.
You're just American, huh?
Yeah, you're a black American or you're American, but you know there are some. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm just telling you my experience. I had people upset with me.
Did you get any details into why do they see you as like a natural born, like okay, when we talk about ancestry, they don't consider your ancestry from this slavery?
They just don't like the connection. No.
So they say that the black people here were already here.
Not that. It's just that to make that direct connection. And I didn't get into, because I wasn't sure where people were going to go with it.
Okay.
So I wasn't willing to get into some deep argument with them about it. But they said it, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting thought to me. But no, there were some people who just said, you're not from here. You're not an African, so don't call yourself an African American.
Wow.
And again, I'm not saying that was the attitude of everybody. I'm just saying I experienced that. Okay. In terms of Afrikaans, there's a term that was used for the white people in South Africa, because South Africa has this whole history of apartheid. There's probably a whole nother show. So the white people in South Africa, they were called Afrikaans, like Afrikans, something like that. But it wasn't because they were native originally. You know, they came in, years later, but had a significant impact upon the development of that country. Really very similar to Jim Crow. The whole apartheid movement there was very similar to Jim Crow here, but maybe on steroids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you basically talking about a system of programming, raising a whole generation of people, huh? That's basically what Jim Crow was. Definitely. It was the same concept, but probably worse, to be honest with you. It's probably significantly more difficult. That's horrible. So it's saying like a system of white supremacy that covered the globe, huh?
You always gonna have everywhere you go, you're gonna have some issues of colonialism and things like that impact and suppressed.
Really
Well, let me jump in here real quick because I wanted to touch on a question you just asked concerning. I want to talk about it from the attitudes of how Black Americans, me as a Black American for the first time going to Africa, how I felt like I wanted to be connected. I wanted to be connected to my motherland, but I realized that I wasn't connected in a sense. But they embraced me. They embraced me in Kenya. They embraced us in Kenya as if we were from there. So when he was talking about the different parts of Africa who may question your whether or not you're a true African, that's not how all Africans think, because they're familiar with our story, so to speak, to the point where this the nation of Kenya, or Nairobi, Kenya to be specific, they was willing to embrace us like, you're Kenyan,
right?
You're from here, So you just want to kill that difference, and like when you're saying about it's 40 different countries. Just say 40 at the least, different countries that make up the continent of Africa. A lot of the western parts of Africa, they think about, they've experienced racial issues in a different way from the east side of Africa. Even though there was colonialism, it's not the same level of oppression that went on in just like the apartheid, some of the slave trading that went on in Africa. So the Kenyans automatically, in the visit that we took, they was all embracing. They were like, man, you from Kenya. Forget it. You one of us. You let everybody know that you can come here. So. Well,
in the '60s, it was a group of black Americans that did go to Kenya, right? And set up a colony or something like that.
Well, yeah, you did have kind of a since slavery ended, you've had back to Africa movements. You always have. I mean, it's like you try to find our roots, and some of the leaders from the civil rights movement, and I'm specifically thinking of one person, and I don't want to say his name wrong. I want to say it was Stokely Carmichael. Actually went back and changed his name to Kwame Ture. Right. He went back, and he never came back. And so, yeah, you had people who went back there to embrace that life.
Between Kenya and Ghana, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, probably more Ghana than Kenya. I don't know exactly where he went, but I don't think it was Kenya. I'm almost positive it was Ghana. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got Professor James Smalls over there right now. That's something that is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons we went over there in particular.
That's what what motivated y'all to go to Africa anyway? What was the goal y'all had to go?
Yeah, I have a relationship with the church there, Nairobi Gospel Center International. Bishop Charles Malema, and we met back in 2014, and he invited me to come, and so out of that relationship, is where all of this came. And so this was my third year in a row going back. So basically I've been going back every 2015, 16, 17.
Is that an expensive trip?
It depends. It depends upon when you buy your ticket. That's the biggest expense. That ticket can go from anywhere from, I think I've gotten it as low as $650. And
That's round trip?
yeah.
Okay.
And I also bought it once and went like over Christmas time. It was really expensive. And I paid as much as $2,500.
Oh.
Right, so it just depends upon that, depends on where you stay. So, I mean, you can go for as low as, $1,400-$1,500. And obviously, depending upon how you fly, first class, all that kind of stuff like that, you can pay quite a bit. Just depends upon where you go, what you're doing.
Now, you say you had a relationship with a bishop in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
Are the African people really religious people?
Again, that's a hard statement. The African people.
Okay.
Okay.
Are the Kenyans?
No, it's good.
I got you. Are the
Yeah,
Kenyans?
I would say that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the nation of Kenya considers itself about 80% Christian.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's a high emphasis.
Are there a lot of disputes between black Christians and Muslims over there? In that particular area?
I don't think so. But I can't honestly speak to that. I can't speak to that with intelligence.
Gotcha.
But I don't see it. I mean, that doesn't mean that there's not differences. But I know in the area where we stayed in Embakasi, I mean, there were Muslim compounds right there. You could see people. There was a mosque right there right down the street from the church, and you drove through there and you knew those people were Muslim. I mean, based upon dress. And they were living right there together. Obviously, there's. Oh yeah.
Not just not Arabs.
No. They were black.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the only way you can tell the difference is dress.
Right.
You could tell by what they were wearing. They were Muslim. But no, I didn't see conflicts. But again, I see it from American eyes.
Gotcha.
And there's a flow that happens there that we don't always understand. Even you talk about something like the difference between tribes.
Gotcha.
That's not something that you would normally see because we may be from different tribes, but I couldn't tell that just by looking at you.
Okay.
And so, but there is significant differences from one tribe to another tribe.
One of the things that I found interesting when we was over there is that most of the people who live in Nairobi, Kenya, they're not necessarily from Nairobi, Kenya. They're from different counties outside of Nairobi. And Kenya itself is made up of 47 different counties. So part of the purpose of the church was to plant a church in all 47 counties. That was a part of the mission. So we went doing what you would call a vision, reasserting their vision. They do it twice a year. Mm-hmm. So they reassert their vision twice a year. And so when people retire from Nairobi, working in Nairobi, Kenya, they end up going back to the counties that they're from. So
you have to go back to their village, wherever they are, where their home. They have a house, right, and they have a home. Their house may be in Nairobi, but their home, where they're originally from, that's where you go when you retire.
Yeah. So part of the significance of planting those churches in all 47 counties is so that those people who attend that church will have a church that's like the one that they go to back in their village when they go back to their village.
Let me just say something else about that, because there's a religious aspect to that, mm-hmm, in terms of having a church to go to, but there's also an economic development piece to that as well, which is really brilliant in terms of what Bishop Malema is doing, because mostly, from what I understand, and I feel strange sometimes sounding like I'm an expert on Africa, but I'm not. But one of the
you went 7 times and 7 times of Africa.
Yeah,
you're an expert as an American expert.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah, but I think that what happened is that in terms of development of the country, the development happened in Nairobi, but it didn't happen in the outlying villages where people are from. So therefore, there's not a lot of infrastructure or economic development in those outer villages. So what Bishop Malema's vision was that because that economic development happened in Nairobi, and when you go downtown Nairobi, it's like driving downtown Chicago. You know, we got this image. One of my big issues is that I want to help people change this image we have of Africa. You know, we think of Africa, we think of, you know, Zulu warriors and
this is what's in my
Oonga
head
Boonga.
right now, and I can't
you know,
even help it.
Right, but it's
can't even
natural.
help it.
It's a natural thing because that's what you've seen.
This is what I'm thinking
You
y'all
know.
dealing with. I mean, as you explaining your trip, as y'all explaining this, I'm just seeing you going through the bushes and
No.
you know what I mean?
Right.
You know
And see, that is.
but this, I don't want to do it like that. But
Yeah.
this is unconscious. I can't even help it.
But that's
This-
good though.
this the
It's good.
programming.
It's good that we having this then because
Right.
it's not the truth. You know,
Right.
it's
That
not
ain't-
the
it's
truth.
not true.
It's not true
I
at
know
all.
it's not true though.
Yeah.
I know it's not true. I Google plenty of pictures of that.
Right.
I look around there.
Right, but that's what you've been fed. Let me just pause there for a second. I don't want to forget where I'm at, but I just saw something interesting today, just this morning on YouTube. I mean on Facebook. I got a post that today is the 100th anniversary of the death of this pygmy named Otto. I forgot his last name, but his nickname was Otto Bingo. But he was a pygmy that they had locked up in a zoo in the Bronx.
Wow.
You know, and they had him on display as the missing link. And they kept him in a cage as a display as the missing link. And he killed himself in 1916, committed suicide after a point. But that shows you that was the mentality. So people coming, you see Africa, you think of natives and elephants. And do those things exist? Yes. But is that all of Africa? No, it's not. And so it's one of the things that's really important for me is to help people understand, to break some of those myths and those paradigms and say, this is all that Africa is, right? So that's important. So, you know, if I showed you pictures, you know, you would see that, wait a minute, these folks are as brilliant and as educated and as gifted as we are. And I'll be honest with you, this church that I'm involved in, this is probably the best church I've ever been involved in 40 years. Organizationally, in terms of the leadership and the brilliance of these people, I cannot believe that they let me come into their program. I am not saying that, and I am dead. I said that to them directly. I can't believe you let me even stand here. That's how much respect I have for the leadership in this place. And so what I'm getting at is that, so what happened is that the villages did not get the economic development. But you have this church that has great resources because of the people working there and things like that. And so part of the vision was to take the resources from this church here in Nairobi and to redistribute those resources back out into the villages. Level of resource. And so that's a powerful, powerful vision. It's not just about, you know, kingdom work and souls being saved. That's important. But it also is about recognizing that you can't ignore people's physical realities just because you're trying to reach the spiritual soul. So there's a holistic understanding of the mission of the church.
And I heard you, Rob, you was mentioning counties.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you mention counties, I'm thinking politics now. So how do they politics work out there? How do they deal with the politics the way we deal with it?
Well, I can't answer the question. Maybe
I mean,
he'd be
what you
better
know about
answering
it?
that
What
question.
you know about it? I mean,
But let me just say,
good.
let me just say this though. You know, what I did learn is that the structure is different. Like meaning, clans and tribes, they're different per like every county has their own structure of the way a family, clans, and tribes are. That's what makes up the way they approach their politics. That's what makes up the way they approach their politics. Where we'll fight amongst each other racially, you know, they fight amongst tribes, which makes up their structure. I don't know if I'm
but the government itself, that structure is pretty consistent. You know, just how you may respond to people within that structure, based upon whether your tribe is in power or not. You know, a person from your tribe.
mental structure.
Right.
Right.
I mean, the reality is that
Are these governments based on religion or
no.
some type of philosophy?
Well, Kenya. Let's talk about Kenya. Kenya is trying to adapt. What's funny is America's governmental structure. Kenya, the country of Kenya, is actually really influenced by America. So we went out to a mall, right? We went out to a mall and we was having lunch, and the biggest thing about the part of the philosophy that was coming from Bishop Charles Malema was that we're emulating in the tax code system. They're emulating America in so many different ways to help formulate their structure, because they've been independent since 1963 is when they became independent from Great Britain.
Okay.
So they're fairly new when it comes to Kenya's fairly new when it comes to their governmental establishing their governmental structure.
Younger than my dad.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Me. Yeah.
Go ahead. I know you want to jump in.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say that you have, again, all of these different countries, and many of them have been colonized by other countries. So, you have Germany, you have Belgium, you have France, you have England, you have all of these different countries that have come in there that have colonized different parts of Africa, which gave you those different countries. Those countries didn't exist, and now you have people coming in there and kind of carving up, drawing up borders. So yeah, you're gonna have very different structures. You go to Benin and Togo and Burkina Faso, they speak French. Congo, they speak French. England, Kenya was influenced by England. So yeah, you're gonna have very different structures depending on where you go. You have some places that are dictators. You have some places that have very much democratic systems. But there is no one monolithic perspective that you can call African.
Do you think democracy will work?
Oh yeah.
There?
Democracy works there. It works there.
Democracy works, period. It's a greed getting it. Democracy works. Like
I heard a philosophy that resonated with me, and they said with the democracy and the majority rules, what if the majority crazy?
Yeah, but
because at one point in America, the majority was crazy. They thought slavery was okay, and so that was the order of the day. So
yeah, but it also corrected itself.
It did,
and that would not have happened without democracy.
That's true. But the part of what I was saying, what this guy was saying is, he was saying that with the democracy, you can propagate to the majority to believe certain things.
I think that's true. I don't care what you do. You can. How do you look at Nazi Germany?
Okay.
You had one person's philosophy completely shaped the direction of that country. That was not democracy.
Dictatorship.
It was a dictator, right? And so his particular philosophy and his charisma, his ability to communicate, to draw upon what was happening economically, politically at the time, was able to redirect the country into a way that was horrific. That wasn't democracy, but you almost didn't have any way to counterbalance it. So I think that with democracy works. I think can it be corrupted? Of course it can be corrupted. Everything can be corrupted. Simply because we're broken people. And so broken people are going to break stuff. So I don't care what it is, we're going to break stuff. So no matter how good it is, we're going to break it because we're selfish. So yeah, it works. You look at that country, you look at how they've developed in 50 years. It wouldn't happen that way if you didn't have good people. And so democracy works.
One of the cracks that I see in democracy in America is if you never really, in a certain sense, establish a governing belief system or governing moral code, like how most people will call it religion, Christianity, and Muslim or whatever. What happens is when you have so many different people that have a liberated mindset that whatever I say is right, then the name of the game becomes influence. So it's like, I'm trying to influence you to believe whatever I believe. So the name of the game is influence. The thing with America, though, because we never established it, then now we're beginning to see elements of this liberated movement about whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, whatever, it's beginning to be established, and there's nothing we can do to rebuttal liberation. You can't tell somebody how else to feel about what they believe. So the name of the game is become majority rules, influence. That's democracy. That's how it works.
I hear what you're saying, but it kind of was like a Bible, which is the Constitution.
Okay.
So that's supposed to be that structure. You know what I mean? When it's because I thought we were supposed to be a republic, and the republic says, the republic says these are the rules. This is how it works for everybody, and that's what's going on. But obviously, that's not how it works in America. But so we do technically got something that say this is how it's supposed to work for everybody, but it's not. It's just not working like that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time, if you, without being spiritual about it,
Okay.
but there was a time when there was a standard that we said, well, these are the standards that we're going to live by.
A moral code.
There was a moral.
just
You
within
talk
the
about that
community.
moral code. There was a moral code that we chose to live by.
And it's gone. And I don't know if it seems like it's gone. Not even like you say, not to be religious about it, but it's gone. People just accepting so many different crazy things,
Right.
and they want to blame it on, oh, you just have a religious mindset. This is why you're not accepting these ideas. But that's really just not the case. It's just like, it's so hard to get into.
I think that there are certain things that are, when you say that there is nothing right or wrong,
Right.
when you remove any absolute, then anything goes.
Right.
When you remove the reality of absolutes. So, for example, I can go to my desk and pull out a ruler and say this is 1 inch. You don't. If you tell me no, that's your inch. My inch is this big. Oh, no, my inch is this big. Well, now you got problems.
There's a problem.
Because there is no, you've rejected absolute. If you reject, the only reason that a compass works is because there's something called magnetic north. You take away magnetic north and the compass means nothing. So we do believe in absolute truth, but we want to remove the idea of absolutes when it comes to morality.
That's right.
Right?
That's good enough. That's
Right.
Right, and so therefore we have to be able to say, wait a minute, if I don't have something that's absolute, anything goes. And then you can't just start picking and choosing what's right and what's wrong. And because you're going to pick and choose based upon what's good for you.
And that's what's going on these days.
And that's what's happening. And so, you can call it religious, whatever you want to, but the reality is that you got to have some standard. You can't just have people driving in cars where everybody does what's right in his own eyes. You have chaos. So absolutes is having absolutes is what gives us order to our culture. And in the absence of that, we have chaos. And that is where we're moving to as a country, because we have removed even the idea of something always being right, something always being wrong.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is the risk of democracy. The risk of democracy is the fact that there's no absolutes in our liberation. There's no absolutes. That's the biggest threat to democracy. It's not that democracy don't work, but that's the biggest threat to it.
Every
That's
idea needs liberating, right?
every idea needs a limit or an absolute.
Right.
An absolute.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, but this is what's going on. Everybody who with any old idea needs liberation, and they got a whole movement.
Everybody got a whole movement, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
And so
How that relates to Africa is, they're trying to emulate, well, they are establishing democracy in a sense because we've been prosperous with it. In overall biggest term, scheme of things, we've been prosperous with it. So most nations want to emulate success. So but just to make sure that our African brothers and sisters know the risk of democracy is going to come from a hard decision maybe one day to establish what is the moral code, what is the absolute in their moral code. I don't know what that may be for them, whether it be religion or whatever, but that's going to have to be established because liberation is right there ready to push democracy all the way to the limit because it's going to be a majority rules thing.
But you know what? I would rather have a democratic system where there is at least several voices that are establishing that, as opposed to a dictatorship where there's one voice that is saying this is what's right and what's wrong. That's where you get into major issues. When you have one person that says this is what's right and what's wrong, as opposed to a plurality of voices that can speak into that. And again, I'm talking about in the absence of the religious moral code. As a Christian, I'm gonna say, I know what my moral code is, and my moral code is the Bible, but not everybody's gonna hold to that. So and I choose that simply because it's subjective. It's beyond what I feel is right or wrong. There's some moral codes thing in the Bible I'd rather not hold to. I don't want to be turning the other cheek to somebody else. I want to turn your cheek. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, but it's subjective. It's not based upon what I think is right or wrong. And so when you develop a moral code based upon a particular individual, that person is going to do what's best for them without regard to what's best for everybody. And that under a perfect society, and the society, again, going back as a Christian, the kingdom culture, that code, it's a code that is based upon something bigger than what's best for me individually, what's best for my politics, what's best for my past, what's best for my people. So that's the difference, I think. So I would take, I've been a lot of places around the world, I would take our democratic system over anybody.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, I would take it with all of its flaws, all of its weaknesses, all of its craziness. I would take it because there's always a chance that people could correct it. Many other systems, there is no mechanism for correcting the craziness.
Right.
And so therefore, I would take a chance. I may not have liked the last election in terms of the way the last election turns out, but you know what I know? In 4 years, we got a chance to change it.
That's right.
Okay, now since we into that, we over there, we back in America now. We did just have an election that took place, and there's a lot of black folks that's upset about that, and there's a lot of black folks that didn't show up to the polls.
There you go.
And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they said that the media made this election so depressing that they depressed people away from the vote, from the polls. And I'm not a super political guy myself, but I gotta throw my opinion in there real quick. Not necessarily opinion, but where I stand at as far as this. It's a slippery slope, right? Because I was a part of the generation that Hillary Clinton called super predators. So like I don't have a short-term memory. So like literally, it was no way she was getting my vote. I don't care who was against her. All right, and I'm just putting that out there. Not that I support a Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. I know people don't even know how to differentiate the difference. They say because if you don't do this, then you're definitely down with that. But that's not the case. That's not true at all. It's just because I can't see myself in no way supporting a Trump either. So I would go a Jill Stein just to say this is my protest against both you clowns. Yeah. This is my idea. Well, okay, so how do y'all feel about this? How do you feel about this, pal? You know what I mean? What's going on, Rob? Where you at with this? I mean, because I just interviewed 3 guys from the south side of Chicago, black men, that said they happy Trump was in office. Different reasons, but they said this, and so I guess you get what one reason was is a rally call for black folks to come together or something like that.
Okay, let me jump in there on that thing. Let me jump in there on that thing. I'll jump in there on that thing.
Go ahead.
I'm glad Trump is in office. Not because for the same reason. For the same reason. Not because I think he's a great president or anything else. Because I feel as though it's based on a statement you just made. Now I mean no offense to this towards you. I'm not political. I beg to differ. You are political. Everything, you are political. Whether you want to be engaged or not is up to you completely. Yes. These policies and these things that's occurring all around us, ignorance is not an excuse. A lack of engagement is not an excuse because you frustrated. You know, we got this silent protest going on. You going to the crib. No, that's not true. Your politics is in everything you do, whether you get the benefit over in your neighborhood from the economic structure, whether enough votes are cast to lower the taxes in your neighborhood. We all are engaged in the political process. The reason why we are so economically behind is because we have dispositions to say, I'm not into politics. Politics is into you. Politics is all the way into you. You know, and so we gotta graduate from that way of being and thinking. And you know, I know we've been friends a long time, so I don't, you know, I'm not trying to offend you, but you know, I just wanted to get engaged from that standpoint. And with this Trump thing, it was an example you used. Now you used this example in Africa, and I stole it. I'm not gonna even lie, I stole this example. He was saying basically if 50% of the people showed up to the polls to vote, that means Trump won 25% of the vote. So 25% of the people that got engaged in the whole political process voted for our president. And we trying to figure out why we upset. And then you got people running around saying I ain't involved in the policy. Well, you can't say nothing about Trump. That's why I'm saying I'm glad he's in office, to say, well, wake up, get engaged, get involved. I need TJ's opinion. I need everybody's opinion. Yes, you can call in and write in Jill Stein or Bernie Sanders. You can write that vote in. You ain't got to go to no polls. You got to. Somebody else needs to know that they got that right available the same way you figured out I'm a protest. They need to know they can do that.
Right. You know, a lot of people don't even realize that there's a green party.
Right.
They think it's red and blue. You know, and so there's that type of information. We need to probably go for that. Right.
There's just a couple of things I would say about that, and I would concur with Rob.
Donald Trump.
Okay, I would say that there's a couple of things to reiterate what Rob was saying about participation in the process. To me, if you don't participate, then duct tape your mouth. You forfeited your right to speak. Because the reality is that, as he said, only 50% voter turnout of eligible voters. Now, we're not even talking about the fact that a whole lot of people have been disenfranchised because of prison records and things like that. There's a lot of people who don't even have the right to vote anymore. So you have a huge number of people that have been disenfranchised that way. But in terms of the eligible voters, only 50% turned out. Okay? Then if only 50% of the people who turned out voted, therefore, like he said, that means 25% of the population, the eligible population, voted. Well, then how in the world can you complain about the outcome when you don't participate in the process? So to me, I don't care what write in somebody, write in your own name, but you participate in the process, because if you don't, to me, you lose your voice. You forfeit your voice when you don't participate at all in the process. You don't have a right to complain about it if you don't give your opinion. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, from a historical standpoint, and from an African American, from a black person standpoint, people died to give me the right to vote. Literally died. People were killed in order for me to be able to go to the polls. And so for me to not take advantage of that opportunity and that responsibility to participate in the system is spitting on the graves of those people who died in order to give me the right to vote. And so when we ignore that, when we fail to respect that sacrifice, we're failing to respect our history. And we can talk about black power all you want. You can talk about racism, you can talk about oppression all you want. But the reality is that our political system is also what gave us freedom. And when you don't participate in that process, you disrespect all of the people who died to give us that right. And I refuse to do that. I don't care how much I dislike the candidates. I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote for somebody because it is out of respect for those who marched across, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. For those who were water hosed, for those who had, ketchup poured on their heads, for those who had dogs sicked on them. I've been to Birmingham. I was in that park where they sick the dogs on the people. I was in that church where they bombed and killed those 4 little girls. You know, I was there. And so to see that I'm disrespecting their deaths when I don't participate in the process. So I don't care how bad the process is. It's a better process than any place else in the world. And out of respect for my history and my people, I will always vote.
I've been in this conversation, or I've at least witnessed this conversation a number of times before. And one of the rebuttals to those things you just said was there's some people say, well, I'm still American, and as an American, I got the right to say what I want to say or have an opinion. And I've heard, as an American, I got the right to not vote. Okay, and then as far as the people that died, a lot of people was against integration, and some people would argue that that it wasn't about voting per se that people died. It was more about just getting rights more so than necessarily voting per se.
Goodman, Cheney, those 3 men, the brother and the 2 Jewish guys who died. They died because they hid their bodies. Those men were killed, and I don't have the exact dates, and I might have their names right. But I know it was Goodman, Cheney, and I forgot the other guy's name. Okay. They were voter registration. They were registering people to vote. That's why they were killed, because voting is what gives us a voice. Right. That is our system. If we don't like this system, go to a different country. I'm sorry. I just believe that. If you don't like the system here, if you think the system isn't right, either participate to change it or go to a different country. But this is the system we're in. Right. If you're in this system, fix it. You can either curse the darkness or you can light a candle. Mm-hmm. But you don't get to sit there and curse the darkness and do nothing. Right. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I'm saying is that we can justify what we want to, but we can justify apathy. We can justify laziness. But I refuse to accept that. If you don't like the system, change it. And you change it by participating in the process. If you don't like the process, change the process. But but revolution happens when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And our problem is that we want to complain, but then we don't want to do anything. We want to say, oh, I want to lose weight, but you won't get up off the couch. Shut up.
That's to tie this point into like the whole African trip. The whole African trip brought me back with a definite different sensitivity and a perspective. I got a different sensitivity to everything that's going on. It changed my worldview. Okay. We as a nation sometimes, man, we complain about things that we don't have the influence to impact or change. We'll complain about it, but we won't get involved. We scared to be wrong about something. We scared to not have enough knowledge about something. Instead of going out and getting the knowledge and getting all of the perspective necessary in order to make a conscientious decision, we'll complain like my right is to not be involved. Man, that's a coward of ignorance. Like you are really saying openly that I will not be disciplined enough to go out and get the information I need to make so I can stand up in between the gap between ignorance and knowing and motivate people to the land of knowing, or motivate people to the land of conquering the fears that we have about our society. Now, I'm relating that to what you said about voting, right? Okay. What you said about voting. There's people like, some people would say that it's just they right to not do nothing or not to be involved. That's, I know I have too. And I'm tired of hearing it, because you mess around and get called a coon. Okay. Somebody for opening a book and knowing something. And I'm specifically talking about perspective concerning the black community right now. Okay. Because most of that stuff you hear in black communities about, I don't need to know that stuff, or I ain't involved in that, or that, man, what is that talking about? And meanwhile, all these other nationalities are running away from us with the whole society in their back pocket. Yeah. And we still looking around blaming somebody else, and we still making comments like, well, maybe it's my right not to vote. baby, that's my right. You know, well, man, what is you talking about, man? You know, I'm almost specifically talking to men.
Right.
I ain't even really talking to the women right now, because that's the line of commitment I'm in. But so, going forward, my perspective coming from Africa is about, man, when you talk, when you crack your mouth open, I want to know what problem you solving based that's pushing up against you, that's creating a frustration. How are you approaching that frustration? How are you approaching that frustration? That's who I want to be surrounded by. That's who everybody I shake hands with. I want to be going to situations with people who are willing to sacrifice everything they got to solve the frustrations about our realities and how we get the knowledge. Whether it be getting underneath Pastor Perry so I can soak his knowledge up, so I can go out as my own alpha male to impact the frustrations of my life. That's what I'm about right now. I'm not about all them excuses and all that stuff that's going on. I'm sorry, I get a little excited, you know.
That action, balls.
Yeah, man.
But it is about, that's what it's about. It's about solving problems.
Yes, problem.
It's about problem solving. We can all sit up and cry in our beer about the problems. But like I said, you can either curse the darkness, you can light a candle. And I think the thing is that I want to know, as a friend of mine said to me the other day, he's talking about his son, he has 3 sons. He said, I've come to the conclusion I would no longer ask young people, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, the question I would always ask them is, what problem are you solving? Mm-hmm. You know, and that's it. We all got problems around us. Mm-hmm. We can all sit around and complain, but what are you doing to change? What are you doing to make the world a better place? Why would the world be better because you were here? And so therefore we have to figure out, within the context we are, how do we make it better? How do we fix it? Mm-hmm. How do we change it? You know, that how do we become change agents? And that starts with our own mind. Mm-hmm. You know, being transformed by the renewing of our own minds. You know, what is it what do you believe that you have the gifts and the abilities and indeed the responsibility to make the world that you live in a better place? And so you can't do that by just sitting around the barbershop complaining. You got to create some solutions. And everything that we see in the world that's better is because somebody was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
And they went and took a chance or something.
And they went and took a chance. They were willing to fail.
Right.
They were willing to fail. And because they were willing to fail, they also were taking the chance to succeed.
Just like this Colin Kaepernick. Let's
get into Colin Kaepernick. I did want to go there.
Colin Kaepernick. Let's go with this, because I know you brought that up before we, when we was talking. Colin Kaepernick. What blows my mind about Colin Kaepernick's situation is this. First of all, and I'm gonna say this directly to these whites in America that don't understand what we're saying when it comes to something like Colin Kaepernick. I'm talking about the ones who don't understand. I'm not talking about all the whites who do understand. Let's be clear about that. Colin Kaepernick. First of all, Colin Kaepernick is a 25-year-old young man, young American. Yeah. This is one of our own, America. This is one of our own people. This is a young man. This young man is doing exactly what we told him to do in silent, respectful protest. But what we focus on him taking a knee. We not focused on the reason why he's taking a knee.
That's too much to think about.
We focused on the fact that he's taking a knee. So you got our president, Trump, coming out here blasting Colin Kaepernick, putting tweets talking about, man, well, he's out of a job right now. Right. Now listen to what his language is. He's out of a job right now. He's out of a way he makes a earning, he makes a living. This president is boasting on the fact that this young American who didn't commit a crime, just stood in silent protest, is out of a way he makes his living. But this man is donating millions of dollars to the project in Somalia, millions of dollars to Black Hood projects, because he felt like Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. For those people who don't understand that, the suggestion is that you're racially too insensitive to try to understand it. And that's sad. That's a tragedy to me.
Is it insensitive, or is it just don't care?
It's a tragedy.
Because it's too old now, and to keep giving it excuses. You know what I mean? When you got these,
That's real.
racism is racism. It's just real. It is what it is. You know. I mean, what they showing us with Colin Kaepernick is stay in your place, black man. That's what that looked like. You know, this is our game, and if you don't stay in your place, you not gonna play on our court. We taking our ball back, and we. And as a race of people, we gonna watch football every Sunday. We ain't gonna care that he did that for us. We ain't gonna. It's so mountain to climb. Go ahead.
I think part of the challenge that we have is that we don't understand our power. We have power. We don't understand it, and so and we fight the wrong fights. Mm-hmm. So to me. Is even as I'm sitting here just processing this, regardless of what you think about his football ability, if for some reason this guy can't get a job and he gets some kind of way blackballed because he made a protest, so did Rosa Parks, mm-hmm. so did Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. There was civil disobedience. To bring the whole point of civil disobedience is to bring light to darkness. It is to shine light upon unjust causes. That is the point of civil disobedience. But from my standpoint, if he's going to be labeled as un-American because he did the American thing and protested, then you don't get my vote of my dollars of watching the National Football League. Yeah. But you see what I'm saying? But
That's
what
right.
do we do? You know, I remember right around Christmas time, everybody was talking about, we're gonna boycott Black Friday. That's foolish, because you know why? You were still gonna go out and spend your money in the exact same places on Saturday. So if you're not gonna, you know, that you haven't
That's
solved
right.
anything.
No,
all you did was delay the day they got your money.
Then you didn't get on a discount.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So what I'm saying is that until we have come together and develop, this is our agenda, this is where we're going as a people, these are the things that are important for us, and are willing to sacrifice, that are willing to put our dollars where our mouth is. And, you know, let's go back to the Montgomery bus boycott. The reason the Montgomery bus boycott worked was because there was a solidarity of thought. That bus boycott almost put that company out of business. I know people who lived in Montgomery at the time. I talked to a man, he's dead now, but I talked to him, he was in his 80s, and he talked to me about living in Montgomery during the Montgomery bus boycott. And he talked about how he couldn't actively participate in it because the job he had was one of the best jobs in the city. And they told him, if you participate in that bus boycott, then we're going to, if you help them in any kind of way, you're going to lose your job. So what they did quietly was finance those people who did. Nobody knows about that. But they quietly gave money to make sure that those people who needed rides had the money to get rides. See, they used their economic clout in a unified way to achieve the purpose they want. But when we become so selfish that we are only concerned about ourselves, we lose our power. You know, and I often say to young people, you know, you must be committed to something larger than yourself and something other than yourself. But when you're committed only to yourself, then the community doesn't matter. When you're committed to something larger than yourself, then you will sacrifice for that in order to do what's best for the greater good, not just what's best for me. And so, and until we develop that mentality of understanding and re-engaging in community, we will sacrifice or we will complain, but we won't do anything. But we have to find a common cause that we're willing to die for, that we're willing to give our life for, that we're willing to say, I will sacrifice everything for this cause. That's what revolution is about.
It just makes me, you know, it bothers me when we, you know, as a country don't allow Colin Kaepernick to be a young man who needs what you will call to be heard and understood from his stand. You know, he's supposed to be a young man to blacks, whites, and all Americans. That's who that is. That's a young man. That man, what, 20 years old millionaire. I mean, he's just 24 years old though. Like that. My oldest son is 24. So you mean to tell me if he was to make some kind of expression about, he's in the military right now, he's in the Air Force. If my son was to come back with a certain disposition about what he's seen in life throughout his military career as a military Air Force police officer, right? If he had a certain sound in him, it'd be our responsibility as Americans to sit him down and say, oh, let me hear what you're saying. Let me see what your concern is. What's going on? What are you talking about? What did you see? Okay, well, how can we fix what you saw? Okay, we going with you. We gonna stand with you. You know, some of us may have feel that his initial expression was disrespectful, but so what? Because you got a point to a bigger point.
If you have questions that you would like to ask the streets, contact us at askthestreetsmedia@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching.